Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of what has now been titled Already Champions, a podcast about life beyond trauma with Jade Miller and Robert Summers. And we got that name from a quote from Jeff Brown that Jade is now going to read. We want you to hear this.
Yeah, when we were discussing names, I wanted it to be something empowering, and I was going through a whole lot of quotes that I had saved on my phone, and this one kind of jumped out at me. And it is from Jeff Brown. I'm not sure which book or which work that this is from, but I really liked it. It says, "Most of the greatest achievements on the planet are unknown to others. Private overcomings, silent attempts at belief, reopening a shattered heart. The real path of champions truly lies within. The transforming of suffering into expansion, the clearing of horrifying debris, the building of a healthy self-concept without tools. The greatest achievers have found a way to believe in something good despite being traumatized and fractured on life's battlefields. No matter what else they accomplish in their lives, they are already champions. One day the world will realize that it is much harder to heal a shattered heart than excel at athletics. Gold medals all around."
And so we also want to remind people that it is possible that the show may not be safe for work. And do you want to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, as far as what we discuss, we kind of have a loose idea per episode on what we would like to talk about, but we don't script anything. That's what makes it fun.
It does. It makes it very fun.
So, we're never really sure exactly what topics are going to come up. We kind of just have a conversation, and we want that to feel like a conversation that you're part of and that, like, we're all sitting on a couch chatting. So we don't know if there will be anything come up that you wouldn't want to be playing at work where other people can hear it. So we just want to go ahead and give that disclaimer on every episode. And also, we are not sure what will come up and if it would be safe for your littles. So just in case topics of abuse or trauma or things like that come up, it would be better if you feel like your little ones should not hear it, to have something on the inside that could occupy them while you're listening. And, you know, if you listen to it one time through and think that they would enjoy it, then once you already know what we say, you're welcome to go back and replay it for them. But initially, we just want to caution you about having littles hear it for the first time.
Right. And let's see. Our last order of business before getting started. Well, actually, that leads us to getting started. We have an excerpt from one of Jade's books that we're going to read. It's from her book, Attachment and Dissociation, A Survivor's Analysis. Now, one thing we always want to remind you folk of is that we are not clinicians, we're not therapists, we're not licensed psychologists, we don't have any fancy degrees or anything. We are just us, and we are sharing our experience. We're not trying to diagnose anything. In fact, we don't even want to have all the answers. We want to empower you to go after what's going to work for you to help you have the most cohesion and cooperation in your heart and mind. Got anything to elaborate on that?
Yeah, we were talking earlier just about how we don't want to present just another clinical podcast. If you want a podcast presented by clinicians, there are those out there. I could recommend a few. We just thought it would be cool to have a podcast where two people who are just trying to negotiate life after trauma and, you know, while we're still recovering from different things, just talk about what that looks like for us. It is not representative of anyone with DID or multiplicity. It is strictly our own experiences and our own opinions. I did want to read this excerpt from one of my books that I released in 2016 because it says it a little bit better than I can just say it spontaneously. But in the front, I don't know if you've read this book or not, but it was just my thoughts and a little bit of analyses on attachment and dissociation, and I'm going to read the excerpt to you. It says...
And I might pause you now and then to discuss.
Okay. It says, "Bear in mind the information contained in these pages," which now we're doing a podcast, "is based on my own thoughts, opinions, and experiences. I am not a doctor. I am not a psychologist, therapist, or psychiatrist. I am simply an intelligent, largely self-educated human being who happens to have lived through a shit ton of painful experiences, and I'm trying to share what I know. These are my credentials. I've survived decades worth of suffering and learned from it. I read, I write, I think deeply, and I listen to other survivors. One thing I try to emphasize on my blog and elsewhere is this. Freud was just a guy. Jung was just a guy. They did largely the same thing I do. They observed, they listened, they theorized, they discussed thoughts with their colleagues, and they came up with ideas based on the results of all those actions. Ideas that are now accepted as foundational tenets of psychology. I say this not to disrespect Freud or Jung, or any of those considered great thinkers in their day, but to try to remove some of the awe and mystique surrounding them. You have the same ability to think, experiment, observe, and reason as they did. Your thoughts are as important as theirs. I'm trying to tell you that the playing field is not as unlevel as we've been raised to think it is, because in the end, the one that matters most on your playing field is you. You are the master and commander of your healing process. Prioritizing your ideas, your values, and your needs are paramount to finding what works for you. At the same time, I do have to say that my words should not be construed as medical or psychiatric advice. If you feel you need professional help, please seek it in whatever capacity you prefer.
Okay.
Having said that, however, and in keeping with the aforementioned, I do not view all doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, or psychologists as sources of absolute truth. There are some very... Oh, shoot, I lost my place. Learning to scroll on a Mac. There are some very compassionate, knowledgeable, and helpful professionals in the world. People who have dedicated their lives to helping others heal from emotional wounds. Likewise, there are some narcissistic, uneducated, destructive professionals in the world as well. Although how or why they seem to end up in helping careers so often is beyond me. I have experienced mostly the latter, and now that I am an adult, I no longer bow my knee to titles or degrees. I have learned and offer these truths to you, that I am in charge of my recovery, and I can direct it as I choose, in whatever way seems most desirable to me. I do not have to explain, apologize, or defend my choices, not to a doctor, a friend, a stranger, or anyone else on earth. I do not need people to understand my choices, although it's nice when they do, but I do ask others to respect them. These same truths are yours, too.
That is awesome. That is, in my opinion, one of the most encouraging prefaces ever. Okay, you have a post from 2016 that every time we repost it, it gets a lot of feedback, the accidental breakthrough post. And I'm sure I know some of the people who are listening have already read that and reread that. Just the whole concept of choosing ourself. Can you go back to the book? There was a thing you said. Did you already close it out? Mm-hmm. You did. Okay.
It'll take me a minute.
That we are in charge of our healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked about your credentials.
Right. I basically have none.
No. Okay. See, you just did the thing. It's the thing, the self-deprecating thing. She's grooming me.
You had a hair.
So many of us who've been through a lot of trauma, especially if it had to do with any narcissists or oppressive abusers, we were taught, I know I was taught and you were taught, to doubt our intuition, to doubt our experience, to doubt what we've been through. And I think sometimes even professionals, I don't think they all mean to. The best therapists teach us to heal ourselves and become disposable rather than, the best teachers are trying to put themselves out of a job, not trying to make themselves a codependent mess. Mm-hmm. But we were taught to doubt our own credentials and our own experience. And to me, that has been one of the biggest struggles of this last year, and highlights of this last year is learning that I actually have a shit ton of experience. I actually have a whole lot of data. I actually know what's best for me most of the time, better than pretty much anybody else. It's just that I doubt myself relentlessly and because I was taught to doubt myself. Would you say that that's an accurate statement?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even what you just said when I talked about your credentials, and you're like, I have none, but you have, like the book says, you have a shit ton
Of painful experiences
Right.
that I have lived through. Sure,
Right.
if that counts.
And and here you are sitting here with our stuffed animals, and we're sitting here safe, talking and encouraging each other, and there's a lot of value in us going, you know what, I lived, so I have some freaking credentials. And I think sometimes those with the official credentials can make us intimidated.
It can, and they're the ones with all the book knowledge, but in the end, if I go to see someone because I need help with something, I don't give a shit whether they know what Freud thought. I want to know, do they understand what I'm going through, or can they imagine it? And what should I do now?
Right.
So that's why, yeah, I mean, I say credentials as far as if I were to be taking clients, the clients would want to know, and rightfully should want to know, what education, what, knowledge do I have that qualifies me to help them. But I think the credentials that the professionals have, if they don't have any experience to help them connect the dots, can be a little bit useless. Because you can read a book about flying a plane all day long, but until you actually get in the cockpit, do you really know anything about it?
Right. You don't know what that. And the plane's a great example because so much of flying is done by feel. Like I've talked to a couple pilots, and they talk about how if you don't understand what liftoff feels like and what all those things feel like, you can't talk a bit about it. You're not a pilot. And I would venture to say that a lot of our listeners have probably learned to doubt themselves as well. And can I read that poem now?
Yes.
Okay.
Read the poem.
I'm going to read a poem. And one thing you will all find out about Robert is that Robert is a rather sensitive fellow. And I typically cry when I'm writing those blog posts. And I cry. I'm a crier.
It's very sweet.
Aw. So Jade read me this poem last night.
And it's written by, I believe, okay, I don't know who it was written by. I thought I did. I found the poem on a blogger called Melissa B. Hawks. I don't know if her blog is still active or not, but the poem was quoted on there, and it doesn't seem to have a source, but that is the best I can do to source the poem. Sorry, guys.
Right. So, well, I'll talk about what I get from this after I read it. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you. All your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. I did it without crying.
Good job.
To me, that's like an ode to emerging from codependency, because it's a missive about how much many of us who've been through a lot of abuse or tumultuous relationships and so forth, we were living our lives for someone else. And a lot of the reason we don't trust our own intuition, we don't take care of ourselves, we don't do proper self-care, we have all these attachment wounds that are unhealed, is because we never look in the mirror and love the one we see there. That person's a stranger, we don't take care of them. And in fact, a lot of times when we're alone with that person, and only in this last year have I really started to not do this. Like, I'm starting to look in the mirror and go, oh man, I like you. And I'm starting to say, I love you, and that's a powerful thing when we genuinely start saying that to ourselves. And we look at ourselves and say, you know what? I love you. I love you. And it starts a healing process, a catalyst that really can be transformative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She's looking at me grinning. So let's go back to you and your accidental breakthrough and attachment and what do you have to say about it?
Well, the post-accidental breakthrough came after a period of time where I was just tired of looking outside myself for answers. Because when you grow up with attachment wounds, and there seem to be very few people on the planet that don't, you're always looking for another person that can fix it. You're always looking for another person to complete you, or another person who can soothe you, or fill in the blank for your particular need that you have that you don't seem to know how to get met, that never seems to be filled for very long.
Can you explain to our listeners, in case this is the first time hearing the concept of attachment wounds or attachment theory, what is that?
Oh, wow. Well, attachment theory could probably be its own podcast, but attachment theory was pioneered by a man named John Bowlby and a lady named Mary Ainsworth. And it's, I'm trying to think of a way to summarize it in simple terms. They theorized that we have a set of behaviors that we're born with as infants that we know innately that help us bond with our caregivers, and the bonding itself is what helps keep us safe from predators. And it also meets our emotional needs. So I don't know that I've explained it real eloquently there, but
That bonding being that trust between the child and caregiver.
yes.
Right.
And so there are certain behaviors that babies do as they're growing up that do things like secure the close presence of a caregiver, like crying or signaling, like waving their arms. When they get a little bit older, crawling, like trying to stay close to the parent or the caregiver. Those are attachment behaviors. They're attachment-seeking behaviors. So babies and infants and children who have healthy parents, those parents respond to their attachment-seeking needs in an appropriate way. If a baby cries, a parent goes and comforts it. They figure out, okay, well, you need a diaper, or you're hungry, or you just need to be held. I mean, back when John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth were doing these things, making their observations, I don't think there was even a general understanding that being held was a need for a baby. People thought, oh, well, if they're hungry, then you give them a bottle, and if they're wet or dirty, you change their diaper, but then other than that, you should just lay them down and leave them alone. But actually, being held and being comforted and just having that skin-to-skin contact is a need, not just for babies, but all human beings. But, so people who do not have healthy parents, or whose parents, sometimes there are things that are beyond the control of anyone, like if a person's father is deployed and they're just not there, then they're not going to get attachment needs met from him, and maybe the mother is too busy with other siblings or whatever. It's not always a malicious, like a withholding of care. It's just for whatever reason. If you didn't get your attachment needs met, then you're going to grow up with this sense of emptiness. And a lot of times it has to do with the mother. A lot of times there's a mother wound there where your mom was distant or just unavailable. And I mean, I'm just naming things that aren't malicious, but then there are people who had abusive parents, and that's a whole different category, but it still falls down into the category of attachment wounds. If you did not have parents who were responsive to your needs in an appropriate way, you probably have attachment wounds. And I mean, I say parents, but really, if you didn't have any caregiver as a baby consistently as you were growing up, then you're probably going to have attachment wounds. So on my blog, I actually started the blog to talk about dissociation, but really I get the most feedback about attachment. And I've always found that interesting. I'm very, very interested and passionate about attachment, about healthy attachment, about what it would mean to heal attachment wounds, because that's been one of my core wounds. And it seems to be for a lot of other people as well. So I get the most feedback and the most questions about attachment, and I'm happy to talk about it. Not a professional, again, but I have a lot of experience.
Right. And so, like, to me, like in everything I've read about attachment, and I have not read nearly as extensively as you, it seems the epiphany you had on your accidental breakthrough log of I, ch- I, I choose me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the choice to decide that I'm actually going to be a priority to myself.
Mm-hmm.
That seems at the heart of healing.
It seems that way to me. Now, it's not a hard and fast conclusion. I am open to other data, but so far in my healing journey, which I've been on for about 13 years now, I spent so many of those years thinking and so hyper focused on someone else, like another person. Usually it was whoever was counseling me or acting in a healing capacity. And I was so hyper focused on that person. Like, I just always thought, well, that person, I need to have a relationship with that person, and that relationship is where I'm going to be healed. And I do think there is some healing that happens in human relationships, but I don't think, once you grow up in a home where you didn't get attachment needs met, I don't think once you're an adult, there is another person who can heal that for you. I think once you become an adult, you have to heal that for yourself. And that was even said to me over and over, but I didn't understand what they meant. Like, I had someone tell me, you need to have connection on the inside. You need to connect with your parts. Your inside people need to be connected. And they would say that to me, and I'd understand it logically, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to apply it. I didn't know what that meant experientially. And I just got to this one specific night where whatever it was, perfect storm of triggers or whatever have you, pissed me off enough to go, you know what? Fuck this shit. I choose me. And it changed something. And I still can't quite comprehend what it was, but it changed things. And for whatever reason, I stopped looking for someone outside myself at that point and realized what I needed was already on the inside. So I guess that's what I'd want to say to anybody listening. If you identify with having attachment wounds, and if you identify with this lifelong quest that I had to find a person on the outside that I thought I needed to have a relationship with in order to heal me, whether it's a mother figure or a father figure or whatever it is, you probably most likely already have what you need on the inside. Mm-hmm. And you probably are not going to find this recreation of the mother you didn't have or the father you didn't have on the outside with someone else. Now, there could be exceptions. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's impossible. I haven't seen it. If you have experienced that, I would love to hear about it.
Well, I think there's for the basics, pardon me, of attachment wounds, we do have to connect on the inside, but there's other things like trust issues and getting over, like learning to trust the world around you, that beyond that outside people can definitely help. I know, like, in our friendship, there's different things we help one another get over, but it's not the same as that core attachment wound.
All right.
I don't even know if I'm making sense here.
Yeah, it makes sense. There are elements of it that you do need outside feedback in order to come to a different conclusion. But I think largely I'm talking about, if you haven't experienced it, it may not sound clear what I'm saying, but if you have experienced it, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like this driving force that you have on the inside to connect with another person. For me, it was a mother figure. To connect with another person that you think is going to be able to heal you. And you may not even be able to verbalize it, or you may not consciously think of it that way, but if you've experienced it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And even if you would say verbally, oh, I know you can't heal me, deep down you really think they can, and you really think that you need constant connection, communication, contact. And really, it's, in my opinion, trying to recreate that really close bond that a baby has with its mom. And once you're a grown-up and that possibility is past, I just don't think that that's going to be possible.
Right.
But you can do that with yourself because you're always with yourself. So I had a lot of inside people who were healed by me going, you know what? Fuck this. I choose all of you. I don't care if anyone else does or not, but I do. And that healed them because I'm always with them. Even if someone on the outside has to go other places and do other things, I'm always with my people. Even if I'm living life on the outside, I'm still present with them on the inside as well. So we're together in the way that I can't be together with another physical person on the outside.
So we had to pause there for a few minutes because sometimes this discussion makes my brain kind of pop because I am, I've mentioned in blog posts and stuff, I'm still overcoming codependency. And for those who don't know what that is, you should, because you probably are too.
But we love you.
Yes, we love you. And one thing Jade and I laugh a lot about, well, at least she laughs more about it than I do at this point, is that, we're all on a path, that we're like, I can be a serious perfectionist with my performance, with like getting it right. And I'm like, she laughs at the fact that I always want to turn everything into a life lesson because I want to learn it and
For yourself.
and not screw it up again.
You're not even teaching anyone else. You want a life lesson for yourself.
I have to learn the things.
Calm down. It's okay.
I have to make everybody happy. And it's BS. It really is, because it's not living, and it's living for the sake of others. It's other focused instead of me focused, and
the day that you intentionally don't make me happy on purpose, I'm baking you a cake.
Challenge accepted.
He doesn't even know what to do with that. I can tell.
Oh man. But it's the thought of like when I'm working on loving my inner self and all those things, but still the thought of rejection by people, especially those closest to me, is terrifying to me, because I want those relationships, and I'm sure our listeners have situations like that too. And hopefully those aren't, I'm lucky you're not abusive, the people in my life right now aren't abusive, you're not abusive, right?
No.
No. Okay, good. But if it can be tricky to get past those mental blocks and just go, you know what? Today I'm going to live not to make this person happy or that person happy, but what do I really need and what do I really want? And that's a scary leap.
It is. And you were talking about rejection there, and one of the things that I wrote in that blog post, Accidental Breakthrough, just a couple of theories that I had noticed, and that's all they are, they're just theories, but I had noticed what seemed like happened with me, that it could be an oversimplification, I'm not sure, but I like to make things simple if that makes them easier to understand. It seems to me like when you have attachment wounds, the brain of a baby or the brain of a child is not advanced enough to interpret things. So whether those wounds happened on purpose or not, they become interpreted as parental rejection. You feel rejected by your parents, whether they're not meeting your needs on purpose or if it's just accidental, coincidental. So when your parents have rejected you, then you in turn reject yourself. And so what sets this whole ball rolling is you have rejected yourself based on what your parents have reflected back to you, that you're not a person worthy of care and having your needs met. So then when you grow up in that state of self-rejection, you don't know how to choose yourself. So on the one hand, you go looking for someone outside you to negate that rejection that you already feel on the inside. But since it's on the inside, nobody on the outside can change that state except you. So you have this voracious appetite for acceptance and reassurance and affirmation from other people, and maybe one specific person. Like I kept looking for acceptance and affirmation from a mother figure, but the irony is, because I had rejected myself, there was really no amount of reassurance I could get from someone outside me that was going to change that. I had to change that. It was an internal state. And nobody on the outside can change that internal state. I had to go, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to reject myself anymore.
Wow. Can I talk about that a little bit? Wow.
You can if you want to pick up your mic.
I put my mic down to just listen to her. Wow. Yeah. Just a vague bit about my upbringing. It was a very charismatic, well, do we need to do a trigger warning? Okay. Very charismatic, faith healing upbringing. My parents were much older than the average parent, and they didn't really know how to handle hyperactive, extremely empathetic and sensitive guy like me. And nothing was ever right, and so like every 3 to 6 months it'd be a different counselor or therapist or whatever. They tried different techniques, and I was never fixed, and so it was constant rejection, and I never felt approval. And so yeah, just what you're saying resounds with me, because I gotta give that to me.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Hashtag because trauma.
Because trauma.
Because trauma. Did you have anything more about that?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just one of those ironic relational things that people can get in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a state on the inside where you've rejected yourself, even when other people give to you, it feels like it's never enough. I mean, it feels good for a second, but then it's like it just slips out. It's like...
And it is only for a second.
Yeah, it feels good, but then it's gone. So you need more. It's almost like an addiction to other people's assurance and acceptance. But no matter how much you get, it's just not enough.
Mm-hmm. And it feels horrible too, because especially if you're in a healthy relationship and you know what you're doing and you're like, I don't want this. And yeah, it's a big mind screw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we are at half an hour now.
Wow.
Wow.
We talked a lot.
We did. We talked a lot. How do you want to wrap it up, Jade?
I have no idea.
No clue. I have an idea.
Okay.
I think the listeners should start a thread on the Facebook page about all the funny self-care things we do because trauma.
Like coffee and
donuts,
because trauma.
brownies, Papa Murphy's, Taco Bell.
Bonus points if it doesn't have anything to do with food.
Right. Keep it, relatively PG, I suppose.
Wow.
Or PG-13, maybe?
What are you thinking about?
Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to end the episode now. Before too much innuendo happens.
Because trauma.
Because trauma. So thank you for listening, and we'll do this again. Do you want to say goodbye, Jade?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.